Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. My name is Saad Siddiqui, and I'm one of the investors at Telstra Ventures. This is our first ever conversational series where we will be talking about how gaming is eating the world. I'm joined today by my colleague Yash Patel, who covers all things gaming. And outside of being a full-time Warriors fan, Yash, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, hi guys, and thanks for having me, Saad. Many of you in the audience might already have met me, but I'm a general partner at Telstra Ventures, driving a lot of our consumer tech investing efforts, but with a particular focus on gaming and esports. And in particular, we're very proud of investments such as Snapchat, Skillz in the mobile gaming side, Mobile Premier League, Team Solo Mid, and a whole bunch of others. But really excited to dig into why this is so exciting, from my perspective and our fund.
Awesome. So Yash, one thing as we kind of get started here, would love to kind of get your thoughts on where we are in the gaming world today and esports and why now?
Yeah, it's a great question, Saad. Gaming has always been endemic to our culture. I think it has only accelerated in the last kind of 4 to 5 years. Really, when we started, exploring this space from an venture investment perspective, there's a bunch of factors that are critical, to why this has kind of reached mainstream relevance. But, I'd sort of call out a few of the key ones. One, we've just got low latency networks now, and kind of the ubiquity of 5G that has launched in the last year or so that has just enabled not only PC and console gaming with kind of fixed networks, but also just the explosion of mobile gaming, which is now, over 50% of the industry and growing rapidly. That is something you cannot kind of ignore. The other piece is really, we just got much better hardware. Not only the next generation of consoles, when you think about Xbox and PlayStation 5, but smartphones and the newest versions of those pieces, and then also new form factors, right? Think about Nintendo Switch and the explosive growth that has had. With not only within Nintendo's ecosystem, but with all sorts of games that are being launched. And then you have the future, right? Virtual reality and mobile augmented reality, as well as kind of headsets that, companies like Apple are sort of hinting at in 2023 and beyond. So the better hardware combined with better networks, combined with probably the most important pieces, this has now become, mainstream in pop culture, right? We're sort of seeing, it's always been endemic when you sort of think about, Todd, you and I, growing up playing, GoldenEye or playing Mario Kart on Nintendo 64, and then moving up to Doom and PC games, and then, more recently into mobile gaming and even mobile gaming with very established franchises like Call of Duty. But, we've got rappers, we've got musicians, we've got athletes that are all kind of investing or becoming ambassadors of this sector in a much bigger way than even before. We saw that with one of our own investments, Team Solo Mid, one of the largest esports franchises in the world, where, we invested, but we were also sort of surprised to see, Steph Curry of the Golden State Warriors or Andre Iguodala of the Golden State Warriors really get into this in a big way. So that cultural relevance is key in terms of gaming and esports as sort of a real, lifestyle choice, right? This isn't just something, that a small percentage of the population actually does. And then I think another really important point is, when we think about gaming, we really think about gaming for everyone, right? So we are not limiting gaming to just teenagers, sort of playing a PC or console game that might be sort of a first-person shooter game or an MMO. That is kind of what you consider hardcore gaming. We actually consider gaming with very different demographics. You see a lot of, female mothers, as an example, playing mobile games, hyper casual games, right? So games like bubble shooter games. We consider chess, a game that has been around for hundreds of years and is now making its way into the esports ecosystem as an esport, right? We consider all these kind of new mobile games, as kind of gamers. And so it's really important that gaming has been democratized for everyone. Everyone is an athlete in sort of the words of Nike, to paraphrase them. And so in this case, we believe everyone is an esports athlete. And so I think that has been really critical to sort of our kind of, interest in the sector. So our foray into gaming and esports from an investment perspective started maybe 4 to 5 years ago. So you might remember this when I kind of came to our partner meeting and was kind of ranting on about what I was seeing some of the established sports leagues in the US do, such as the NBA launching their NBA 2K league, or the NFL starting to explore this, or Major League Baseball starting to explore this, and leagues around the world starting to explore this. And that really, got us thinking as a fund that, we need to place a few bets. And then I think, what really happened is, we expected, gaming and esports to become more mainstream over the next 5 to 10 years. But this little thing called COVID-19, this pandemic, really accelerated that in a huge way, magnitudes more than we had expected. And so now we've seen that, gaming and esports is now, very prevalent. The equity markets, when you think about Wall Street, have now embraced it. When you look at Roblox going public, you look at Skillz going public, you look at Unity, the gaming engines that are actually enabling all these game developers to build these great, wonderful games, going public. That's the difference between now and kind of 5 years ago.
That makes a ton of sense. And Yash, as you sort of talk about like how gaming is permeating in every part of our lifestyle, I kind of think about how when we're working, we're basically on our laptops, we're listening to Clubhouse, we may have CNBC running in the back. Like you've got multiple distraction points. But when I'm playing Call of Duty and you're playing Princess Castle, we actually are pretty focused on the game and what's sort of happening there. And I kind of see there's like in the enterprise world a bit of this envy around like the focus envy. They want people that are shopping are actually shopping on the website and not doing anything else. Or if you're saving money, like being focused and gamifying a lot of these things. I'd love to get your thoughts on the gamification of a bunch of these different verticals as from your vantage point.
Absolutely, Saad. And before we get into that, I just want to clear one thing up. I am a huge Call of Duty Warzone player, and Saad is the Princess player. So regardless, gaming is ubiquitous for everyone. And what you are talking about is sort of the massive gaming envy that other industries are sort of seeing, right? So when we think about how focused the attention span is for these gamers, and how game publishers and streaming companies such as Twitch and YouTube are able to monetize those eyeballs, that's really powerful. And so, when I think about the gamification of other sectors, we've sort of seen this with social, we're seeing this with retail, we're seeing this with e-commerce, we're seeing this with fintech apps. It's really fascinating. And this is not something new, right? When you kind of think about, social and sort of, the gamification of social media platforms, such as Facebook back in the day, it was really, a lot of people would argue that Facebook was built by Farmville, which was produced by Zynga at the time. And so that level of engagement really drove that platform to new levels of success. But when we think about the gamification, I'll call it, of sort of non-gaming sectors, I sort of think about it in sort of 3 buckets. When you're sort of thinking about growth, you're thinking about retention and engagement. I'll call it that second bucket. And you're sort of thinking about monetization. Those 3 buckets are probably the areas that I look for and see more often than not in all the pitch decks that we get for some of these other consumer sectors that are being gamified, right? So whether you're a fitness company like Peloton, or whether you're a fintech app like Robinhood or Public, you're seeing kind of elements of those 3 vectors in the product roadmaps of these board decks as well as investor decks. And that's something that I think is very new and very exciting for the rest of the world. And so what does that actually mean? When we talk about growth, that kind of encompasses 2 things. One is kind of the user acquisition piece, which has been nailed down to a science in the gaming space. And the other piece is around growth with kind of actual inherent product features. So the product piece, we're talking about growing companies through growing apps through incentivized referrals, invite share buttons, user-generated content sharing, optimizing these sign-up flows. And I think the piece around user acquisition cannot be stated enough. What we tend to see is that some of the most interesting user acquisition techniques in gaming are being implemented in non-gaming apps, right? So there's so much innovation when you think about, things like mini game ads or play before you actually download the apps. These kind of ad units are being, constantly, optimized and innovated on in the gaming space, and then make their way to other sectors. In many ways, you think about the whole push notification space. Companies like Swerve or Appboy, I think they used to be called, but the idea of kind of reaching your user at the right time, at the right place, ingesting first-party data, third-party data, doing that at scale in real time. That requires a lot of data science, and that's kind of where gaming companies have really, really done a lot of great work. And you're seeing, companies like Unity, which has one of the largest gaming ad networks out there, just went public, doing a lot of great stuff, and a whole bunch of attribution guys in the space, whether it's AppsFlyer or Singular out there, that are helping, game acquisition specialists as well as non-game acquisition specialists understand, the ROI of their paid acquisition efforts. So that's the first bucket. I think that's really exciting. The second bucket is around sort of retention and engagement, right? So, we're seeing more kind of apps implement things like, building progression systems into, the customer experience, or adding level benefits or social leaderboards, building social graphs, and then, implementing things like live ops, which has historically been in sort of, just gaming, to kind of extend the shelf life of these apps, or at least the user engagement there. So, that's really important. And then the KPIs and metrics associated with retention and engagement in gaming, we're seeing other kind of non-gaming sectors start to adopt, right? When you think about cohort retention, net dollar retention down to a very, very, very granular cohort level for years, and kind of really optimizing that is important, for non-gaming kind of apps to really think about if they want to be a truly engaged type of, sort of service or platform. And then the final piece, which I think is really interesting, is really around monetization, right? So this is, Saad, this is all about like unlocking premium content, launching virtual goods, in-app purchases. In gaming, what we see is that, a lot of, the revenues for these game publishers are focused on sort of optimizing for generating revenues from the whales, who then subsidize the experience for everyone else. So sort of this free experience for everyone, and then sort of whales basically monetizing it. And so, those type of business models, those type of, tipping is another one, when you think about the streaming space, those type of experiences on monetization are increasingly, being adopted by others. And then the final piece I'll add is, we have seen a lot of product managers with gaming DNA. Think about people that worked at Kabam. Think about people that have worked at Scopely. Think about people that have worked at Activision Blizzard, some of the largest, most successful kind of gaming companies out there. They're now kind of setting up new startups or launching new products in areas as diverse as human resources, employee engagement software, to areas in retail and financial services. So one of the things I look for, when we kind of talk to a lot of these companies in the consumer space is, do you have a product guy or a product team with sort of some element of gaming DNA, inherent in them?
I'd love to kind of get your thoughts on how gaming is becoming the new social media platform in some ways.
Yeah, look, it's interesting, like social or, social media companies have always thrived with user-generated content, right? Like they, some of the largest ones in the world, whether you think about Facebook or kind of Yelp, others, they depend on user-generated content and really profit from them, whether that's mining data from them or otherwise. And one of the things we've never really seen is the focus on allowing those users that are creating this content to actually monetize themselves in a more authentic way. And you're more recently seeing that in gaming and kind of other sectors with companies like Patreon or OnlyFans, YouTube and Twitch are kind of launching, more interesting propositions. But the reality is they do not get even a fraction of what, the platforms actually benefit from them in terms of real revenues. And so that brings us to like this whole idea of the creator economy. And the creator economy in gaming is really exciting when you think about the growth of modding by users to kind of drive this game experience for everyone. live ops and kind of, these virtual currencies such as Robux and sort of Roblox and that whole ecosystem and mining, creators are basically enabling a lot of interesting, new experiences and then monetizing that through live streaming, through tipping, through subscriptions for content, through the buying and selling of virtual items. And so when I kind of think about that, that whole ecosystem, gaming has always kind of perfected that. And we're seeing kind of other areas in the social space start to adopt that. And so what that begs a question, and I think you were hinting at is, is gaming going to be the new social media? And I would argue that I don't know if a gaming publisher will actually become the next Facebook, but a social media company such as Facebook is already moving into gaming in such a big way. When you click on the Facebook gaming tab within the app, you see some of the top content creators on there all the time, generating tons of views. You think about Fortnite and the Travis Scott concert out there. You think about what Roblox is doing. It's absolutely incredible. So I really am excited about sort of gaming becoming the next social media. And it's still TBD on who will kind of win that space. And there may be no winner. It may just be sort of an open protocol, an open world that we kind of are launching into.
Definitely. And I think this also kind of gives rise from a monetization perspective to things like NFT and stuff like that. Any comments on that front, Yash?
I'm glad you brought up like probably the most buzzwordy thing in kind of tech today, because I'm super excited about NFTs and especially the implications in gaming. We've obviously seen NFTs rise to prominence in the traditional sports world, in the art collectible world, all these kind of crypto collectibles. But what's most exciting about NFTs for a creator perspective is that NFTs are built off of blockchain, right? This decentralized ledger that has an accurate record of all the transactions that have happened about this asset that is being sold between different users. Because of that, that enables the original creator of that NFT to continue to monetize themselves through all the secondary transactions out there. That is a very powerful piece because it removes sort of the middleman and allows creators to actually continue to monetize themselves into perpetuity. It has a lot of implications, not only for sort of sports and music and kind of these other sectors, but what could happen in sort of gaming. When you think about buying a virtual skin in Fortnite or Call of Duty, those kind of ecosystems, those economies, those kind of skins are only valid in those individual environments. If I can actually have ownership of that through blockchain outside of those environments, that becomes really powerful. Right now, gaming is so siloed, and it's very hard from an interoperability perspective to kind of enable these kind of transactions across different environments or different games. But that is something that I think NFTs will be really exciting. Dapper Labs is building a protocol, around Flow, which is doing a lot to kind of enable, all sorts of apps and new gaming companies to build on this blockchain. And so I'm really excited to see what they're up to.
No, that makes a ton of sense. Yash, one thing I as you're sort of like talking, it seems like we're kind of putting the puzzle pieces together for the world that kind of seems like trending towards the Ready Player One universe. Is that sort of why is that what we're building towards?
I absolutely think we are building towards a metaverse, right? Is what you're sort of describing. And, it's still a whiles away. And I think there's certain obstacles that you're sort of thinking about, before that can fully happen. I mean, first of all, you kind of need the VR and AR headsets to really be at a better price point, better resolution, and really mass market before we even talk about this. We're talking about 5G now, but 6G networks in the future will definitely be an enabler of just lightning fast speeds for this sort of metaverse. I would sort of say that the key kind of areas that I kind of look at is, will there be a persistent identifier in this metaverse that we're talking about, right? Will it be synchronous and live? Will it be inherently social? Will it have a fully functioning economy? Meaning, where can you actually barter and trade or sell skins back and forth between different gaming environments? And then will this span the digital and physical worlds, right? We saw Niantic and Pokemon Go really prove that out, in the past. But, how will this look like, with these new kind of AR headsets in the future? And then, I think most importantly, will it be interoperable, not siloed, right? And decentralized. And so, I think the metaverse, it could become the gateway to a whole bunch of new digital experiences, but it's still TBD. I think I was reading the other day, it's really interesting. Facebook has literally, I think, 20% of their employee base focused on kind of hardware and primarily Oculus, right? So, while I haven't been the biggest fan of VR, I do like a lot of the games that they're sort of, focused on building on that platform, and games like Rec Room in the past that we've seen out there that have gotten some prominence. But it's still sort of a bit of a whiles away. So we're not ready for just the Ready Player One metaverse just yet.
And we can talk about this forever, but I see a ton of questions sort of piling in, and I'd love to kind of get to those to keep the conversation going. And before we get to those questions, we're going to be hosting our second session here, where we'll be talking about the infrastructure that's going to be needed for the vision that Yash has painted so far. And that will be hosted on April 21st, and we'd love to see you guys there. And as we sort of get into some of the other questions here, let's see. Before that, we will be sharing this video on our website and also on our social media pages. So if you miss something, check our website out, and we'll catch up on some of these conversations.
Great. Saad, I'm just looking at the questions here. We've got a few, and I think the first one somebody asked is how active are corporate venture capital in this sector? And I would sort of say that they are extremely active, right? So there's so many players when you think about gaming, when you think about the hardware guys, you think about the game publishers. I spend a lot of my time talking to, folks like Activision Blizzard and other large game publishers. As well as the actual kind of platforms that will kind of enable this. You think about Unity and others. So corporate venture capital arms are absolutely interested in this. Everything from like the semiconductor chip manufacturers that need to power the graphic processors to enable this, all the way up to the actual game publishers themselves that are looking to acquire IP and sports rights to create their next mobile game, for example, right? And so people are realizing that gaming and esports is a really, it's a big phenomenon. It's no longer just a glorified marketing exercises in the eyes of the large game publishers when they think of setting up these esports tournaments. It's actually something that can extend the shelf life of these games and by proxy, the revenues for everyone involved in that ecosystem.
Yeah. And the question earlier is from Aaron at Rock Partners. He asked about what are some adjacent services in the esports value chain that you see appearing here.
Oh, sorry, say that again, Saad.
What are some adjacent services that are sort of coming up alongside the esports world that you're sort of seeing?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So one of the areas that we focused on historically is like the picks and shovels of the esports and gaming ecosystem, right? So we haven't historically been an investor in studios, not to say that they're not a venture investable asset, but we have just been more focused on investing like platforms such as Skillz, which are enabling new business models. In this case, cash prize competitions are actually more of an authentic way to monetize gamers than spamming them with digital ads, right? That, all these programmatic ad companies and Facebook and Google kind of enable. And so, when we think about that, we're sort of looking at very interesting platforms to enable the next billion game developers. So think of the web flow for gaming, right? So can you enable people to create games without actually having technical knowledge, right? Without being able to program, but actually use drag and drop functionality. So sort of like Webflow or even Shopify on the e-commerce side. That's really exciting. And that, I think, is kind of one of the key areas that we're sort of looking at. We haven't seen too many companies do that, although there's some that are, making more progress there. On the streaming side, you've obviously, seen companies like, obviously Twitch and YouTube on the bigger side, but then Caffeine TV and Mixer, which was recently abandoned by Microsoft. But I think we are kind of interested in companies that can enable for these creators in this ecosystem to monetize themselves in a more authentic, natural way. And so there's companies like Streamlabs that allow, all sorts of streamers to kind of push their content all over the place. So we're quite open in that, part of the ecosystem. And then, I would sort of say in esports specifically, I think there's a bit of an issue between sort of the movement of data between companies like Twitch, where a lot of the viewership is happening, and the publishers and the brand sponsors, right? So to actually understand the ROI of your spend, if you're spending, $500,000 a year or $1 million a year on a Twitch, sort of esports tournament, is actually pretty tough right now, given the lack of data and APIs that enables this cross transfer of information. So I think, hopefully it'd be interesting to see some of these companies, evolve and develop and kind of develop some interoperability there.
So we're getting some questions around gaming and education, and how gaming is like education one side, but also workplace education, and how that's sort of entering the workforce. You might have seen the report on how Amazon is gamifying their warehouse operations. Any thoughts on gaming in the workplace?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things we've actually seen in the workplace is the launch of sort of virtual reality, like workplace training, right? So when you think about things like, there are actually virtual reality kind of simulations that are being developed by corporations that are actually out there and using kind of Oculus or other VR headsets to kind of enable employees to go through that and understand how they should react in those situations. Amazon's gamification of their workforce in their warehouses is absolutely, an excellent example of that, right? So they spend about 10 hours a day, these workers and, doing quite mundane tasks. And in order to improve productivity, they've started to gamify the whole experience. So they're giving away free, virtual penguin avatars to workers that achieve certain levels or milestones, right? So you can absolutely see not just corporate training, but corporate productivity. And in a lot of ways, we've sort of seen this, with kind of rewards in the HR space. When you think about, companies, giving, sort of discounts off of gym memberships, or, awarding top performers, with certain prizes. And so to actually see that done in a more sort of gamified way through the actual software experience, on your laptop, on your mobile phone, where it's seamless and easy, that's kind of interesting. And as I mentioned before, we've seen a lot of gaming DNA product managers move into the HR space in a bigger way.
Just to kind of add a little bit to that, as I sort of think about like how the enterprise sector is also evolving, we're seeing the elements sort of be around open source, and the community building aspect in the open source side is also a thing that I think the enterprise side has sort of picked up from the gaming world. In addition to that, like product-led growth, where people can test out the product, similar to how people test out games and then sort of add on features on top. That's another thing that we're sort of seeing in the enterprise. And one of the key things there that's really important is trying to get metrics around engagement, around monetization, and all the things that you sort of talked about.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yash, James asked a question around gamification of some of the other sectors like finance, and any sort of ethical ramifications that may come from it. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, like with any new technology, AI or otherwise, gamification, is generally very positive and good on the whole for many industries. When you think about education, what gamification has done, to enable kids to find, learning more interesting and actually be rewarded by that, it's excellent. But, there are, implications for folks that, make things almost too gamified, right? So, a perfect example of that might be Robinhood, right? Where they've democratized access to stock investing for the masses. But, at the same time, there need to be guardrails and sort of education around, how to, maintain, reasonable expectations in the stock market, how not to, sort of treat the stock market necessarily like a game. But the actual user experience of sort of, these investing apps on the whole has actually enabled or opened up a new swath of the market in terms of the equity markets to actually participate, right? So this has actually opened up something that previously we've only seen kind of Wall Street funds, institutional investors, kind of control, and we're seeing retail investors, really start to drive, movement in certain stocks and equities in general, and I think in a positive way, right? In a way that, makes it clear that this is a force to be reckoned with. So the democratization of, certain sectors through sort of gaming, I think is really, really powerful. But of course, it's really important to balance, too much gamification in that regard.
Another question James Stewart asked is, who are some of our friends on the corporate venture side? Like, do you see other corporate ventures kind of investing in the gaming sector?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't even, I don't know if they're corporate or financial investors. Some of them are on this, call right now, but, some of the guys I really respect, on the investor side, folks like BigCraft and some of the early kind of ESL kind of folks, that have done a lot at the seed stage. Griffin Gaming Partners has done a lot. We've seen, companies like Liberty Global, which owns a whole bunch of sports assets, that has invested alongside us, in companies like Skillz. We've seen Intel Capital historically has been very involved for obvious reasons. In this, many telcos are looking at this. Microsoft, as well with their Xbox division, Qualcomm Ventures, with their, graphics cards. So, everyone that's involved in that, kind of like supply chain in gaming, as well as everyone involved in the whole kind of ecosystem, have been, particularly very active. I would call out that a lot of the Asian kind of conglomerates, internet companies, have been very active. I think the most prolific games investor in the world is probably Tencent out of China. And so they've done a lot of great work. Some of the Tencent folks have moved over to Andreessen Horowitz and are doing a lot of great work over there, such as Jonathan Lai. So, I would sort of say that the Asian kind of internet giants have been always very active. In Southeast Asia, you've got guys like SEA that are doing really interesting work, as well. So from a corporate venture perspective, I'm really excited to partner with these folks, as well as, continue to kind of source deals and provide deal flow for everyone, that's sort of interested.
Awesome. We're also looking forward to working with them in a lot more deals as well. Tony asked a question around how some of these, the game publishers and the engines that they run, like Unity and Unreal, they seem to be pretty powerful and require a lot of dedicated hardware. How do you sort of think about one of the reasons adoption may be limited is the amount of hardware that you need? Is that a limiting factor for enterprise adoption here?
Yeah, so, in gaming, there's been this growth of what we call cloud native gaming, basically effectively killing the console. So, with 5G, edge compute, and new processing, you can actually access new types of cross-platform games that all the guys are sort of focused on. When you kind of think about Google and Stadia and Microsoft and xCloud, there's a lot of folks that are focused on sort of cloud native gaming, so that I don't have to have a super hyped up rigged computer or PC to actually enjoy that same level of fidelity of the graphics, et cetera, that somebody else across the world may have. And so I'm really excited about sort of cloud native gaming and many of the new types of games that will kind of emerge over there. When we think about sort of the big guys like Qualcomm and all the kind of chip manufacturers out there, they are absolutely focused on, producing, better graphics cards, et cetera. And so they continue to kind of really drive this, not only for the gaming sector, but for the blockchain and crypto sector, when you think about all the compute and processing power that's needed. So they're definitely quite advanced, when it comes to sort of cloud, I'll call it cloud native, not only gaming, but cloud operations in general that are highly intensive from a compute perspective.
That makes kind of sense. And that wraps it up for today. Once again, thanks to everyone for joining us today. And next time on April 21st, we will be talking about how gaming is the next big enterprise vertical and all the great things that we need there. One of the things that I'm personally really excited about is the amount of data that's coming out of these games and the analytics that you can do on top and the way the network needs and things like that. It's pretty powerful stuff. And I think in some ways, this progresses society forward, both on the gaming side. Gaming tends to be a leading indicator in terms of where the enterprise ends up going. So I'm really excited to talk about that with Yash on April 21st. And thanks again for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. We really enjoyed it, and look forward to seeing you at the next talk.